the abbot at Dharma Rain in Portland, Oregon. I've been practicing for just about 30 years and have been living in a monastic container for 25 of those years. So, um, yeah, that's kind of what I'm up to. So apparently you're talking about Keizan for the month, or maybe you've been talking about Keizan for a while, but no, okay, okay. So we're kind of kicking off. So that's great. I can say anything. That's great. So Keizan was, the greatest ancestor. Like Dogen and Keizan are kind of held up as the two um, big names in Soto Zen, and Keizan was really the one who spread. Dogen really brought this kind of depth of practice, and Keizan popularized it and brought it. That's kind of sounds bad, but it really made it more accessible for others. Over the course of his teaching, um, the arc of his teaching, he went from being very um, strict, kind of aggressive, to being really quite compassionate. Um, he was known for being a supporter of lay practice, of women in practice. He was known for incorporating a lot of folk elements into rituals, which we're still doing today. And he's known for primarily for the Denko Roku, and that's I wanna speak to that today in particular, the Denko Roku. So in our lineage, um, we have this tradition of doing Denkoe Sesshin, which is a week-long retreat every spring, and we focus on one of the chapters of the Denko Roku. And um, so the Rokus, there's this whole kind of um, stream of Zen literature, which are basically like stories of the ancestors. And these happened in China, so starting around the 800 Common Era up through the 1400s. So Keizan was at the very tail end of that. He was Dogen's great great grandchild in the Dharma. So and then there were some very early versions of Rokus, were like the biographies of eminent monks, and there were quite a few of those, and they would mostly tell little exchanges, right? They were sort of a obituary that was recorded, or kind of the greatest hits for a particular teacher, things like that. Little anecdotes from their lives. Most of the later Rokus, as this style of writing got more evolved and recognized, the later ones tended to pivot on a particular encounter and then have more commentary on that encounter. And different lineages, like Rinzai had his Roku, Dongshan Tozan had his Roku, Keizan wrote one. There are a bunch of them, and each lineage kind of used it as a way of establishing and authenticating their particular stream of practice. This was important in the Chinese context because there was this very Chinese emphasis on history and ancestry. This form of discourse of it just didn't exist in India, right? History was held very differently in that culture. Another like purpose of this mode of expression was to kind of refine and formulate the characteristic doctrines or teachings of a particular line or a particular teacher. What's that personality? What's that flavor? What's that voice? So, reading through the Denkoroku, you get a sense of like, oh, this is the Soto Zen that went through Dogen and Keizan. Like this is this particular flavor, and you get to see who Keizan is as a teacher in his telling of all these other stories that you can read other versions of. And you get to see like what he really valued, what was important, what he wanted to underline and like highlight for us. Yeah, and it's something that like this is one of the things that really early on for me just like established me in Zen. Really, the like what the Rokus are speaking to. Like when I when I was kind of like casting around trying to find like what am I for? Like how do I do this? What really counts in life? Um, the fact that there was this like record of people for whom this had worked, right? It had worked for this person, they taught it to this person, it worked for them, they taught it to this person, it worked for them. Like that was kind of, even if it was, to some extent metaphorical and fictional at times and places, like there was this record of it. That was really huge for me. It gave this sense of rigor and trustworthiness, and that like I really resonated with. I really wanted that. Um, so it still works. So I want to zoom in on Keizan's description of an encounter between the eighth ancestor Butsudanandai, but I'm using the Japanese pronunciations because that's how I chant it. We chant the lineage every day, and we chant it in Japanese. And how Butsudanandai met Fudamitta. Um, so I want to read the root case here. First, I close the book. So Fudamitta heard Butsudanandai say, "Your words and mind are your closest relations. Even your father and mother cannot compare with them. Your actions and the way are in accord. The mind of the Buddhas is none other than this. If you seek outside a Buddha with marks, those do not resemble you. If you wish to recognize your original mind, it is not identical, nor is it separate." Buddhmitra was then greatly awakened. So, those are the turning words, right? It's equivalent to the main case in a koan. In the Denkoroku by Keizan, there's a description of a pivotal interaction, and then a kind of like narrative, like how does this fit in? What's the context? And then Keizan goes into really like the Dharma talk part of it, of an elucidation of the Dharmic significance of the story. And then there's a short like capping verse, a 2-line, 4-line sometimes poem. So kind of following that format, I want to give a little bit more of the backstory. When Butsudanandai, this eighth ancestor, traveled to Magadha, which is the land where Buddha was enlightened, he was preaching to and converting merchants and farmers in the capital city. And as he was going about his business, he saw this white light over this particular house, and he's like, "Okay, folks, let's go there. And in this household, there's got to be a sage. His mouth has never spoken, and his feet have never touched the ground. Um, and he's going to be my heir." And the you know someone comes out of the house and says like, "What's up? What can I help you with?" And Butsudanandai says, I'm looking for my attendant." And this person who came out of the house says, "Well, I have a son, but he's 50 years old and he can't talk or walk." And Butsudanandai says, perfect, just what I'm looking for. And hearing this, Buddhamitra gets out of bed, offers prostrations, doing full bows, and then asks Butsudanandai a question. My father and mother are not my kin. Who is most akin? The Buddhas are not my path. Whose is the supreme path? And so then Butsudanandai gives that answer. You're more akin to mine than parents. If you speak of Buddha outside, bears no resemblance. If you want to know your original mind, it is neither together nor separate. And at that point, Buddhamitra takes 7 steps forward. Butsudanandai explains to his father that it's because of a profound vow and a formal life that he can do this, and that his not walking or talking arose from a love for his parents and a fear that he would lose them if he would leave them if he fully manifested in the world. His desire for awakening, for renunciation was so great. And at this point, the dad interrupts and says, can he take the precepts? And so it happens. He does. So there's this kind of like dreamy, mythic quality to this story. It feels a little more surreal than miraculous. There's this child who's 50, right? He doesn't walk or talk, and suddenly he can do both. He takes 7 steps just like Shakyamuni did. That kind of surrealist quality is found in a lot of the Indian ancestor stories. And I suspect that has a lot to do with the fact that there's not that much known about them. And so Keizan is quoting sections from earlier rokus here. He's borrowing phrases from earlier stuff. So some stuff is just passed down, but then he's also adding his interpretation. And like the Chinese ancestors have a lot more details. It's a lot more concrete, a different feel. This answer by Butsudanandai is showing Fudamitra that the caring that he feels for his parents is not diminished by taking refuge in essential mind, right? That non-action is an aspect of the path, but there's more. And I think this is one of the interesting points here is that different commentaries say different things about his 50 years of non-action. Some say that is just being in accord with the truth, and some say that is like it's a miss. It's a passing of life, out of fear, out of a kind of avoidance of making a mistake. And so, that's one of the things we get to look at here and see, like, how does that land? So I wanna pause there and make sure we're landing this right. It's not just a story. These are instructions for life. So notice yourself right now. Establish mindfulness in this moment. All right, check your posture. Check the quality of mind. Noticing, just what sensations are present right now. Noticing the speed of thought, of commentary. And I'd like everybody to invite up an example from your life when your wish to protect or care for something led to some version of shutdown, some closing up, some withdrawal. And just see what appears, what comes forward. You won't have to tell about it, but so let it happen internally. And notice who you were at that moment. What was it like to be you? posturally. Your voice, if you were using it. What was the situation? You don't have to explain it, but notice what you saw, what you heard right there. Notice the meaning that you gave to it. And so there's probably a piece of that which is tender. There's probably something in there which the mind kind of slips off of easily. It's a little it's the kind of the suffering piece. And what I would invite is to hold it there, let to get to push on that a little bit gently. And notice what's important about that. And maybe even what's beautiful about that. So there's an aspect of how, there's a contortion, um, there's a armoring that happens, and there's something really pure also available there. And can you feel into that? Often, if you let yourself stay with that tender, the ouchness of it, there's a kind of somatic impulse towards something, and that's a good cue to what what's important there. So that's really what Buddhmitra was getting at, right? That's what he was trying to show. This movement from attached caring, right? The fear of leaving one's parents, the fear of making a mistake, the fear of not being enough, whatever it might be for you in a moment, to embodied engagement, to taking one's place in this ancestral line, to absorbing and transmitting wisdom, to taking care of your life and letting it impact you as you do. Right? The caring isn't the problem, it's the attachment. It's that um, constriction around the caring. And if we can like find that point of constriction and look through it, look underneath it for that caring, it feels really pure. Right? That is bodhicitta. That is the way-seeking mind. So prior to this meeting, Fudamitra, he wants to protect his parents. There is something beautiful there, and he freezes his development, right? After this meeting, after this pivot point is shown, is demonstrated for him, Fudamitra sees a way to truly help others, including his parents, right? To actualize the way. That bodhicitta underlies both expressions, right? The frozen one and this engagement. So part of what we're learning with practice is how to look past the attachment, the small self, and notice what's deeper. There's these extras that the small self is reacting to, but there's also this really basic yearning that we can channel. It's really true here. And we often find it as something that's really simple, right? Like if you, as you were doing this little like experiment, um, my guess is that nobody found it like, oh, like here's this really like clear, lucid sentence of like what I really wanted, right? Um, it tends to be kind of pre-verbal. It's often felt like in the heart. You can't see, but I'm tapping my heart. um, not it's not up here. It's not a storyline or an explanation. That's when we feel that if we feel a tenderness and we kind of go up, that's self-accumulating typically. That's trying to explain it. That's creating a little more distance so we can see it out there. And what I'm talking about, what uh, Fudamitra saw was like feeling that ouch and going deeper. What's underneath? What's most true? If I'm struggling with that, if I'm finding a suffering and the tendency is to go up, one of my little like challenges for myself is like, how could I show this to a 3-year-old, right? We have a preschool here. I once a week I get to teach tumbling to the 3-year-olds. It's one of the highlights of my week, and so I have lots of examples of that. So then Keizan moves into like the teisho part, the commentary on this exchange. He offers an explanation for it, why it happened the way it did. He shows how the story models um, aspects of Zen. This direct pointing that is only discovered through mind, through this mind, the simplicity and the authenticity of face-to-face encounter. My favorite bit from there is he says, from ages past until the present, things have been this way. But even so, you must not come thinking of fall over by oneself, get up by oneself. Thus, the ancestral teachers have close face-to-face encounters, simply meeting one another in such a way. Beyond that, there is not much to it. I should be clear from this aforementioned episode. Another translation says they just met as such, and there was no big deal besides, which I really like. Awakening, yes, like awakening is, it's significant and it's no big deal, right? It's something you need to aspire towards and work to and ultimately find for yourself. But don't think you can do it without a sangha. Don't think you can do it without a teacher, right? I'll speak for myself. I am much too good at fooling myself. I have cultivated that capacity and refined it like my whole life, and I desperately need sangha to bounce off of, to aid that refinement. We need that grit. It's uncomfortable, and it's so worth it. It's so much more productive. And don't inflate that connection, right? Don't make it separate from you. Don't hold it outside somehow. It's just people living life and bouncing off each other. We do it all the time. The reflecting and shaping that happens in Sangha with a teacher in front of an altar, right? Like it's pervasive and ordinary. And it's sacred and significant, right? We set our shoes straight. There is like, that's an ordinary action and we imbue it with meaning, right? It's an expression of how we take care. We bow when we enter the Zendo. It's ordinary action and there's so much there. When we're close to mind, it is bright, it is profound. We're aware of the weight and the depth of the ocean. And when we're far from mind, we have that sense of being, buffeted by the waves, right? That little experiment, that exercise of selfing and then deepening through it is demonstrating that. When we activate mindfulness to remember a moment of selfing, of reactivity, whether gross or subtle, like of how conditioning takes over and constricts the flow of experience. That's very distinct. And then when we find a way to get closer to mind, the feeling into the oceans and noticing how experience actually lives in the hara, rooted in what's essential, it's quite different. So that's a skill that takes repetition. If we practice it, we trust it more, we expect it more, it gets easier to imagine it's possible. Like when we're caught by something, one of the marks, one of the identifying features of being caught is that like it feels kind of urgent, it feels critical, it feels desperate, like we don't see options. Mindfulness doesn't look realistic, it doesn't feel relevant, it seems like a bother or too painful or overwhelming, right? So we have to build up that trust because it doesn't look like a way forward in when we really need it. So lots of repetition. And repetition, like like do this when it doesn't really count, right? Like if you save this for like the big events, the heroic endeavors, like I don't advise it. It's not there's it doesn't work. We need lots of trial and error on like really simple everyday stuff. That's part of this teaching of set your shoes straight, right? Like it may be faster to kick them off. You may think you set them straight and then notice like one's at a diagonal. Like, do we gloss over it or do we like, let it in? So find, yeah, like just taking all those little things. And when we do it, like it's bright, it's clear, right? It's confirming, it's familiar. It's quite satisfying, even when the content of that experience is not pleasant, right? That's not what it depends on. Going back to the root exchange, I think we're almost done here, but so just a smidgen here. Fudamitta's question: if father and mother are not my close relations, then who is most closely related to me? If Buddhas are not my way, then who is the best way? And the answer: your words and mind are your closest relations. Even your father and mother cannot compare with them. Your actions and the way are in accord. The mind of the Buddhas is none other than this. If you seek outside a Buddha with marks, those do not resemble you. If you wish to recognize your original mind, it is not separate nor identical. The Butsudanandai's answer is that right now, immediately here, is closest, right? Is nearest to mind, is nearest to Buddha. This is the red heart of Zen. Don't separate, don't remove yourself from the intimacy of experience of life. Any other Buddha outside of this is irrelevant. And Keizan ends with a short poem, a little capping verse. He says, "Do not say that speech and silence involve transcendence and subtlety. How could there be defilement of own nature by sense faculties and sense objects?" What I hear him saying there is that experience and action come and go. Like we meet others, we impact the world around us. There's all this engagement and caring and causation. And in the midst of that, there is something which does not move. Something is not affected. And that something does not have a shape, and we can recognize it. That's the transcendence part, right? The more subtle we can be, the more transcendence we can express. The less we're pushed around by our conditionings, the less we self our way through life, the more we transmit that which doesn't have a shape. So that's my talk. That's what we're that's what this one's about. Is that pivot point of looking through, finding suffering, following it in, and getting to feel that transcendence.